have gone to great lengths to protect the privacy of all TraceTogether users in all normal use cases. But TraceTogether data is not exempt from Section 22 of the CPC.
Minister in charge of the Smart Nation Initiative, Vivian Balakrishnan, addresses the use of TraceTogether data by the police. A 15-year-old boy who attacked Singaporean Jonathan Mock in London last year has been found guilty of a racist act. And start the year right with some top tips from our Invest editor on how you can become a millionaire with CPF. You're watching The Big Story, coming to you live from the Straits Times newsroom. I'm Olivia Quay. You can subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you never miss a single episode. Let's start with the latest COVID-19 case numbers. 28 new cases confirmed today, including 2 in the community. The remaining 26 were imported, and these cases had been placed on stay-home notices or isolated. Among them, 4 are Singaporeans or PRs and 13 are foreign domestic workers. Well, in Parliament today, Minister in charge of the Smart Nation Initiative, Dr. Vivian Balakrishnan, addressed the privacy concerns surrounding TraceTogether. This following yesterday's parliamentary sitting when MP Desmond Tan said that the Singapore Police Force has access to the TraceTogether data for criminal investigations.
TraceTogether only collects Bluetooth proximity data on a temporary basis. It does not collect, and I want to emphasize, it does not collect GPS location data nor movement data. The app or the token only keeps a temporary record of who you have come into close contact with for a prolonged basis. Neither the app nor the token tracks a user's location. The data is then stored in an encrypted form locally on your device. That means either your phone or the token. And that data, that encrypted data, is automatically purged after 25 days.
Well, Leader of the Opposition, Pritam Singh, asked for examples of when TraceTogether data will be used by the police. And in response, Home Affairs and Law Minister K. Shanmugam explained that although Section 20 of the Criminal Procedure Code allows for the police to obtain this data, they will only do it in serious criminal investigations.
To give you an example, let's say there is a murder and victim's family, and information is available on the TraceTogether token. If police chose not to seek that information, you can imagine how the victim's family and indeed the rest of Singapore might react to that situation. The police approach has been and will be that it's pretty much restricted to very serious offenses. And while that requirement is not in the legislation, it will be carefully considered within the police, and discretion will be exercised in seeking this information.
Well, and Workers' Party MP Jaul Giam also asked Dr. Balakrishnan, I beg your pardon, if the government had considered the impact on the public's adoption of TraceTogether. Dr. Balakrishnan replied that he will maintain the approach of helping the public understand the reasons behind these measures as opposed to enforcing mandatory rules.
I believe that our victory over this pandemic is not by us sitting up here and issuing rules and edicts, but that our people must understand not only the measures that we're implementing, but why we're implementing it, the spirit behind it, so that with their understanding and voluntary and full cooperation, we can achieve success. And it is in that spirit, therefore, that we have these open discussions, and why I remain confident that the participation rate in contact tracing, using the latest tools that we have available, will remain high, and why I hope we will continue to be one of the bright spots in the world.
Well, Singapore editor for the Straits Times, Zakir Hussain, joins me now to take this topic further. Before we talk more about what Dr. Balakrishnan said today, Zak, perhaps we can first take a step back. Can you help us unpack the issues that were raised following what Desmond Tan said in Parliament yesterday?
So I think 24 hours ago, many of our viewers and readers were caught by surprise that Minister of State Desmond Tan publicly acknowledged, I think it was the first acknowledgement by a government official, that the police will be able to tap on TraceTogether data, for investigations. And I think many sort of reacted quite in a surprised manner, because I think they looked back at previous assurances that this data would be used largely or primarily for contact tracing purposes, and there were all these assurances about privacy and so on. And I think there was a bit of, as leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh noted, I think consternation on the ground. And I think this was probably why the Minister in charge of Smart Nation, Vivian Balakrishnan, decided they had to come out in Parliament today and basically try to set the record straight.
Right.
And I think what was interesting was the couple of points he made. I think he gave the assurances that there was always this conscious need to protect privacy, and the safeguards were inbuilt in the TraceTogether tokens. Data would be expunged for after 25 days, and it only captures proximity data, not location data. The other point is that actually the law, the Criminal Procedure Code, has always allowed the police fairly broad latitude to investigate in the event of a serious offence, and whether it's banking secrecy laws or privacy laws, in this case, your TraceTogether data as well, there's been latitude for the police to act and to investigate.
We were talking off air before the show that you don't think that what Desmond Tan said yesterday is contrary to anything that the ministers had said before about TraceTogether, right?
Yeah, I think, in every case, although data is meant to be used and there are all these privacy safeguards and regulations, in the event of a serious crime or offence, say a murder or, a potentially grave robbery, I think if there is sufficient room for the police to investigate, as I think the Home Affairs Minister Shanmugam noted earlier, if police did not use these powers to, to pursue justice, I think there would be an uproar. I think what was telling was during the debate today, Minister Vivian hinted slightly about, that maybe they did consider, they did think about whether they should have, some of these provisions to maybe exempt TraceTogether data from being looked at. We're not sure how these discussions went or how they might resurface in future. But I think the bigger picture is there has always been latitude for law enforcement to override, if you would, some of these privacy laws in the larger interest.
Right.
And I think most Singaporeans, after, in spite of the initial reactions, I think the majority of Singaporeans will not mind giving up some of these, privacy rights, I'd say.
Then what do you make of what Dr. Balakrishnan and Mr. Shanmugam said today? Do you think their clarifications were adequate enough, comprehensive enough to address privacy concerns?
I think, for MPs, they probably were. But I think people out there aren't going to be reassured. I think this is an issue that is going to need constant explanation time and again. And I think what was striking for me was you had both the leader of the opposition, Pritam Singh, and alternate GRC MP Gerald Yam, I think, both come out and say that, everybody wants TraceTogether to succeed. Gerald Yam even said he'd gone out to convince people to use the token. And he wanted to put on record that he supported the system, and I think it's important to ensure that these safeguards are robust enough and in place. And I think this debate will continue.
Okay. Well, on the public's point of view, we learned yesterday that 78% of the population are using TraceTogether. That's more than 4.2 million people. But like you said earlier, it may take some time for the public to
that's right.
get over this matter, I guess.
Yeah.
So do you think that 78% is the peak of TraceTogether adoption that we're going to see?
I'm not sure. I think TraceTogether safe entry or TraceTogether check-ins are not mandatory yet at places until everyone's is able to collect their token. But if, say, schools or public malls or buildings were to mandate TraceTogether check-ins, I think you might get a higher adoption rate. 78% is pretty good. I think if you look elsewhere in the world, there have always been concerns about privacy and security. It's hard to say. I think you might get a minority who choose to opt out, and maybe they might not want to visit malls at all. But I think adoption, I'm quite confident. I think the adoption rate will probably rise a little more.
Okay, well, good to have you with us to share more on this. Zakir, thank you very much for joining me today. I've been speaking to Zakir Hussain, the Straits Times' Singapore editor. You can, of course, follow this story over at straitstimes.com. Well, also in Parliament, Second Minister for Trade and Industry, Dr. Tan See Leng, said Singapore has plans to move more into renewable energy, but is taking steps to ensure the supply remains stable and reliable.
We will harness the 4 switches to transform and diversify our energy supply. This is to help us achieve our vision of a clean and efficient energy future. These 4 switches comprise natural gas, solar energy, regional power grids, and emerging low-carbon alternatives like hydrogen.
Well, currently, less than 1% of Singapore's electricity is generated by solar panels. But Dr. Tan said that by 2030, solar energy could supply around 3% of our total electricity consumption. According to him, another option is to tap regional power grids that would allow Singapore to access its neighbours' renewable energy sources.
If we can connect the regional grid well, it will provide greater resilience and sustainability for the entire system. For a start, we are trialling imports of up to 100 megawatts from Peninsular Malaysia. 100 megawatts is about 1.5% of our peak electricity demand. So there will be minimal impact on the reliability as well as cost impact of our electricity supply. Our preference, of course, is to import electricity from renewable energy sources.
Meanwhile, Manpower Minister Josephine Teo said about 1,000 people have been asked to return their payouts from the Self-Employed Person Income Relief Scheme. This after it was found that there were erroneous declarations in their applications.
Those whose declarations met the eligibility criteria received payouts. Subsequent audit affirmed the eligibility of most successful applicants. But we also uncovered some cases of erroneous declarations, constituting about 0.5% of all successful CERS applications. To be fair and consistent to all applicants, those with erroneous declarations have been approached to refund their CERS payouts. Some have already done so, and we will reach out to the rest individually to give them time to do so.
Well, the Ministry of Social and Family Development study on the intergenerational effects of divorce on children here was put into scrutiny in Parliament today for its methodology and negative effects the results may cause. The study found that children of divorces could have lasting disadvantages. MP Carrie Tan had asked for the study's motivations and if there are any measures to look into better communication of such data in the future. This is so that it can be accompanied by deeper insights into the factors studied.
The intent of the MSF to publish this research study is not to guilt-trip anyone, but we have data, administrative data, and we think that there are important observations that can be made from this data. And we wanted to share it with practitioners, with families, so that they understand what the data presents. The next steps we'll look at is to explore what causes divorces and how we can better protect marriages, strengthen marriages, and also to mitigate the impact of divorce. For the time being, we would focus efforts on how we can better strengthen marriages, help the process, when couples are contemplating divorce. I had talked about the pre-divorce support portal, so those will be the immediate next steps that we will be taking.
In other local news, Concord International Hospital, which has been ordered to suspend its medical services, may have its license revoked if it doesn't rectify significant lapses identified by the Health Ministry by January the 20th. These lapses affected patient safety, including life-saving equipment and medication that were either not maintained or not available in critical areas of the hospital. There was also a lack of quality control in the laboratory and infection control processes. A British court has found a 15-year-old boy guilty of a racist act. Now, the boy was part of a group of teenagers who attacked Singaporean student Jonathan Mock in London last February. The verdict comes after the boy pleaded guilty in August last year to wounding or causing grievous bodily harm without intent. He had challenged Mr. Mock's account, saying he and his friends never said, quote, "I don't want your coronavirus in my country," or made any comments regarding Mr. Mock's ethnicity. Hyflux's judicial managers will hold a virtual town hall meeting on January 14th for holders of its perpetual securities, preference shares and medium-term notes. According to the judicial managers, the timing and amount of any recovery for the holders are at this stage uncertain and influenced by several factors. An update of the investor search and restructuring process will be provided during the meeting as well. If your New Year resolution is to spend less and save more, then pay attention to this interview with the Straits Times' invest editor Tan Wee Boon. In his latest piece, he gives the best tips on how you can reap returns of between $200,000 and $1 million for your retirement with your CPF. Wee Boon writes that it's not an exaggeration to say that CPF has been making millionaires out of ordinary working-class Singaporeans who will get to enjoy every dollar that they put there with hardly any risk of losing even a cent. Well, we have to find out more from the man himself. So good to have you back with us, Wee Boon. I have to admit that I don't think too much about CPF, to be honest. I know the company helps me by making the CPF contribution every month, and I pay my mortgage with my CPF. That's about it. So in what ways can I maximize CPF's full potential at this moment in my 30s to ensure that I have enough in my accounts when I retire?
Well, Olivia, as you know, to many people, it always seems like a good idea to use CPF to pay for housing loan. After all, you can't touch your money there until 55, so why not use it, right? But there is a big trade-off if you do this. You will deprive yourself of the chance to have more money when you are older. Okay, you want to ask, how much more? Just a few days ago, someone proudly shared on his Facebook that in his latest CPF statement that was released on Jan 1st, he found out that he earned a total of $25,000 in interest alone in just 1 year. Imagine $25,000 a year from CPF. That's $100,000 in just 4 years. This means that this person has actually accumulated a substantial amount of money, over $700,000 in his account. He would not have been able to earn so much interest if he has been using CPF to pay his housing loan. So now, if you are keen to be like this person and earn lots of interest later on, so what can you do? You don't have to switch to pay everything in cash overnight for your home loan. You can go to your CPF online, reduce the repayment by, say, maybe $500. Just doing this step alone will let you have more money later.
I see. Well, Wee Boon, what about those of our viewers who are watching now who are in their 50s or their 40s? And, you know, there's this scheme, the CPF Life scheme. Can you share your best tips on how these older viewers can gain more from this?
Okay, for CPF Life, after 55, members are required to set aside an amount that will allow them to get monthly payment from 65 for the rest of their life. But for many people, they get the wrong idea that CPF Life actually pays very little money, and that's why it is no good. The reality is all this depends on you. If you want to save less, of course you will get less. But if you set aside the maximum amount, which is $279,000 this year, you will actually get up to $2,300 a month from 65. Having $2,300 a month is almost like getting the starting pay of a young executive all over again, but this time while you are on retirement without having to work. Yes, the initial amount, $279,000, seems like a lot of money, but as you know, CPF is a long-term saving plan, so most people will not have a problem in reaching this sum over 30 years of working if they are conscious of the need. This is why for those who are self-employed, it is important that you top up CPF yourself so that you don't miss out on the benefits. Otherwise, how are you ever going to stop working if you don't have a regular monthly income or sufficient savings?
I see. So we would, CPF, it's a love-hate relationship for some Singaporeans. What are the biggest misconceptions that you've observed about CPF?
I must say that the biggest misconception of CPF is that this is a scheme that is out to prevent you from taking all your money out at 55 so that you can't use it in whatever way you choose to. The reality is this is a scheme that can really give you the option of not having to work anymore after 65. As in all things in life, there is a trade-off. You need to set aside the necessary amount of money so that it can grow and give you, for instance, a monthly income of up to $2,300 a month. If a husband and wife get this amount, this means that they actually get almost $5,000 a month. For many people, this will be enough. Note that by then you are already a retiree. There is no need to save anymore. Just spend this amount every month. It will come again next month and the next and the next until you no longer need money. And this is just money from CPF. With your other savings, you can really have a choice not to work anymore after 65. So really, if you dislike CPF, it is really because you still don't understand what it can do to help you. That, to me, is the biggest misconception of CPF.
Well, as always, thank you very much for making time for us, Wee Boon. That was Tan Wee Boon, Invest Editor at the Straits Times. If you're watching us on YouTube, the link to his story is in the description below. A quick look overseas. The termination of the Kuala Lumpur-Singapore high-speed rail project has drawn strong reactions in Malaysia. Two state governments have urged the government to continue with the project, while members of the public clamour for more details on what went wrong. Several asked the Malaysian government to respond to Transport Minister Ong Ye Kung's explanation yesterday that Singapore couldn't accept Malaysia's proposal to remove Asset's company. Meanwhile, Minister in the Prime Minister's department, Mustafa Mohamad, said Malaysia expects to pay less than $270 million to Singapore for the termination. Indonesia's top terrorist convict Abu Bakar Bashir is set to be released from prison on Friday. The spiritual leader of the Southeast Asia terror group Jemaah Islamiyah has been in jail since his arrest in 2009. In 2011, he was sentenced to 15 years in prison for funding a training camp for terrorists in Aceh province. His sentence was reduced by 55 months on good behaviour. Meanwhile, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has ordered England into a new nationwide lockdown to try to slow a surge in COVID-19 cases. Measures would include school closures from today and rules requiring most people to stay at home apart from essential shopping, exercise and other limited exceptions. Mr. Johnson said that if the timetable of the country's vaccination program went as planned and the number of cases and deaths responded to the lockdown measures as expected, it should be possible to start moving out of lockdown by the middle of February. Well, those are our top stories for today. For more news and videos, visit straitstimes.com and subscribe to our YouTube channel by hitting the red button below. I'm Olivia Quay. Join us tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.